Okay, we're recording.
Okay, great. Well, welcome, Carlos, Jen. Great to see you both, and thanks for joining us. Um, so last week we had a really interesting conversation, and it felt like it went by really fast. And at the end of it, we were kind of on a nice roll, talking about how we talk about death and how our families talk about death and how that shapes our experience of death. Um, and I think in that conversation and also in a previous one, Kim, you had made mention of something you've said to me a number of times, that the veil is thin right now, or when the veil is thin is a good time to recognize or celebrate or connect with people that have passed on. Um, and so, Jen, in the last conversation, you said, let's talk a little bit about what that means. And then it was funny because Kim just called me up on Friday night and said, oh my gosh, it's May 1st. And I forgot to tell you that the veil is thin right now and you should, honor your father tonight. And I can't believe we're doing this session on Sunday and, what timing. So it just so happens that, yes, we've talked about that before, and we happen to be in a phase right now where, as Kim says, the veil is thin. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means today, how we can use that time wisely and celebrate those that have passed on. And I think that's the main point of our conversation, and then just whatever else comes up organically. Kim, did I get that right?
Yeah, I think that today too, we were going to talk about do a little process around holding space. What is space? And I just wanted to talk briefly about the veil is thin because it's such an important transition and an important opportunity. And I did forget it because typically everyone knows around Halloween the veil gets very thin, and that really means that the spirit world and the physical world, there is no separation between the two. And so that happens, actually, it's on the 30th of April every year. And kind of even in these days, though, and moving, even in tomorrow, the veil is very thin. And so how I know, too, is because my phones get slammed. A lot of people call for sessions. And a lot of people experience, even addictions that come up or certain health issues that they experience. And they're thinking, they're not sure what's wrong. They don't understand kind of emotions, unprocessed emotions, since we were talking about grief so much in these past few sessions. And that's why I thought we would do this holding space, because all of the unprocessed grief of our genetic line gets unloaded kind of on us in these times. And the benefit too of, Jen, you were asking, last week, kind of even a ceremony like, so, with the veil being thin, I say hello to my ancestors that have passed. And I didn't have time to put up their pictures and kind of honor them. But even with a candle, even, with a list of kind of new intentions, kind of where I look at what in my life still is unprocessed, what is coming up as a block, what, is even my family working on, because it's interesting, even with my kids, I see certain things from my ancestors that, that are in them. So this is the time right here and now where you can really give thanks to your ancestors. And even if you don't know your ancestors, but giving them acknowledgement is extremely important. And that's connected to with giving acknowledgement right now to the earth, because we have to be witnessed in order to change. And our ancestors kind of come to us, at these times. And if we do not witness them, acknowledge them, then they kind of hold the grief still. And then we then get in these unconscious habits of carrying this grief. And so if we can just actually acknowledge even maybe the patterns that we're continuing to play out, and acknowledge them and get into a new agreement. What I mean by a new agreement with them is a new intention. So for example, this week, I can't tell you how many relationship issues and addiction issues came up for clients. And so what we did is we acknowledged, their ancestors, the past, and then we started to communicate with them as far as, okay, here's what I am working on. I want to create a relationship where I don't continually get abandoned emotionally, where people can really align with be emotionally available, and just with their thoughts and intentions, be aligned with those two. And just in that communication and kind of new agreement with the ancestors, the ancestors have the ability actually as a spirit to work on spiritual things, and we can experience that in the body. So they're observing us work a new kind of something new in our lives. And by them observing us, even, we need an observer to create a new reality. It's easier to shift. It's easier to kind of move into, a whole new phase of our life. And so, and in this time too, the planet is so important because the planet observes us, and we are observing the planet. This is why, long ago in Beltane, even in Ireland, the celebration of Earth right now is happening, of her blooms, of her form, of, her flowering, in a sense, giving thanks to form, allows us then to give thanks that we're going to create something new in this time. And right now we really kind of, as a collective, that's what we're overwhelmed, chaos, exhausted, and it's our opportunity to create new form.
There's a lot of what you said in there that I want to dive into. And I want to do the meditation too, but if you don't mind, while we're all, since you're on this topic, I want to just ask a couple questions to help people that don't have the skill and talent, and people don't see what you see, right? And so there's a couple questions I have in there. One about, is the veil thin between the worlds reliably at certain times of year? You mentioned Halloween, maybe springtime, you said end of April. So that's one question, is it reliably certain times of year that we could then plan for? That's one question. But then the other question is what you mentioned is that it's thin because people call you and people are looking for sessions. People are facing old addictions or old patterns that they can't let go of. And so I'm wondering if that might be a signal for us to pick up on, oh, something's coming up and is kind of in my face that I have not been able to let go of, or that is like a repetitive pattern. Would that be a sign that the veil is thin? So can you talk about predictability, and then how those of us that don't have your skills and talents would get clued into something's going on here?
Yeah. As a collective, the veil is thin in a transition period, like Halloween kind of to winter, and then from spring to summer, like what we're moving into. But the veil gets thin too. It's like, if you've ever heard of, since I was a geriatric care manager, the witching hour. The witching hour for older adults, it's kind of like that 4 o'clock, kind of the early evening, or even when we wake up at 3 o'clock. These are, veil gets thin at certain times, even in our own day. So we can experience, even with the moon cycle, we can experience even on a daily basis. This is why it's important to kind of track when you feel off, when you feel depression, and there's no reason why you feel depression. And because our ancestors can invade us in a sense, they don't mean to. They want to be with us, they want to support us or help us, but then, they can be hungry ghosts too. And then we start eating like crazy, not knowing why we're eating. So we can experience, it depends how sensitive you are too. Some people are extremely sensitive. And if you're sensitive, then you can experience it daily. Otherwise, at certain times of the year, like these 2 times of year, are very important. And the more communication that you can have with, see, whatever we don't acknowledge, is unprocessed. And people don't, it's very important to understand just acknowledging, like my one grandmother, she was really cruel and mean to my dad. So I didn't acknowledge her for years and years. And it was only until I started to acknowledge her, and she's passed, she's long passed, and started to work with her. My father changed, the issues around kind of, that genetic line shifted. And so without acknowledging her, it's kind of like getting, her energy would come on strong and strong. And so this created a new relationship and a new family kind of system.
Okay, great. So one other thing that came to mind from last week's conversation is this idea that just because somebody is no longer in their body, that they have moved on, doesn't mean that you can't create new agreements with them or you can't acknowledge them. And so that's what I'm picking up from what you're talking about is, I sort of think about like what you just said, acknowledging whatever we don't acknowledge is unprocessed, is what you said. And it even makes me think of a relationship that I have been extremely challenged by for almost a decade now, that I finally repaired this past year. And it was just because I had to see the person in their experience instead of through my eyes. I had been seeing this person through my judgment of them. I mean, it was really once I realized what I was doing, which took me a very long time, I was like, oh, I actually was able to see what this person is experiencing, not take it personally. It has to do with their life. And so, and it shifted the entire relationship. And now I have a fantastic relationship with this person, which I thought there's no way I can have a good relationship with them. So I could see how in a genetic line, if somebody has passed on, that be very easy to have unresolved issues with them. There are ways you can resolve that even if they have gone. And a lot of it is just acknowledging their spirit, even if they're no longer with us. Is that right?
That's right. That's right. And that is a very good point that you bring up because, with people where even people that are alive, like you were saying, there's something about a person, then the judgments happen. And a lot of times, with people that we don't get along with, there is something in our ancestors, their ancestors, we're trying to work out, and in that situation in present time, and so that's a very important point because it gives us the opportunity. For example, I remember being at my son's school, and this woman, I met her, she hated me, and I'm like, okay, there's an energy that I'm lighting her up, and it has nothing to do with me, but it lit up pain. And there was a matching picture because I can see, and what I mean by matching picture is I created a lot of pain around her mother's death, which was a suicide. And so I was triggering that in her because of something in my genetic line. So how I dealt with it is started to clear the pictures. And then all of a sudden she becomes my best friend. And I didn't really do anything. But this is where people take things very personal. And like you said, the judgment, this is why kind of holding space in this like 3-step process is so important because our mind can judge something. And really what the person, your friend, people just want to be acknowledged, witnessed, and understood. And if they're not understood, then they freak out even more. And we go into resistance, we withdraw. And so that is very, accurate.
Well, and, for people that don't have the skills that you have, right? I'm just thinking about how can you apply this? It's like, it was, like I said, it was 9 years of struggle with this person. And that was all I could see was that I will never get along with this person. And I'm sure they felt the same way about me. But when I actually finally just, the analogy that I like to use is you have 2 chairs that are facing each other. And if you're in agreement that you're not going to get along, the backs of the chairs are to each other and you never talk to each other. You just are, sort of, as you say, the backspace is like, unconsciously talking to each other. But the minute that I was able to turn my one chair and see the world from her viewpoint, I got a minute where I understood what it must have been like for her I saw what I looked like to her. And I thought, oh my God, that is not who I want to be. And that is not my intention. Right. And I just said, like, I just saw her in that moment. And like our whole relationship after 9 years literally changed in a moment because I just saw her. And
That's right.
I also saw who I was being to her, and it was awful.
Yeah. And that goes with, people may not be able to see, but kind of that leads into holding space. And I think we should check in with people first to see if they have any questions on the veil and kind of the communication. But holding space actually, in this kind of 3-step process will give anyone the ability to navigate this and then to really transform things in their life that if you're not aware of it, you just can't because you can't see it. Like something happened where you were able to really see it and then witness it and then shift it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to check in on the veil piece.
Yes.
But I'm excited to go through this process, Kim. I look forward to learning about these tools and this approach to holding space. In terms of the veil, I do a lot of lunar rhythm following in my own personal life. And I just wanted to repeat back what I'm hearing, which is, I know that that in paganism, and there are 8 quarter points of the major transitions between as the moon and the sun shifts and the season shift. And I know that at certain points, there's a lot of death and birth because of the transition. So does that have to do with why the veil's thinner? Is the natural, winter, the dying out, the growing? And is that just a point where nature's more receptive to communication between living and death? Is that?
Yeah, it's kind of like that transition point. There's like birth and endings, like working as a geriatric care manager and then looking at births, kind of same thing, like that transition point. And it's in that space kind of in between. And then when you look at even the pagan, just the Yule, the Beltane, kind of those different points in nature, following it in nature. This is why our communication with nature is so important, because she's alive. She's the goddess in a sense. And celebrating her, acknowledging her, then can really, she is really our genetic line of form. And so, yes, it's exactly right. That is in nature, because we want to be gardeners of our life. And gardeners just don't plant seeds anytime. They follow cycles, and what is a cycle? A cycle is a circle. And, and in that circle and in that time of birth, life, and death, in a day or in a year or in a month, a lunar cycle, if we're in tune with that, like even our grandparents were all in tune with that, with planting, with farming, with, nature, and we've lost that. And since people have lost that, see, maybe things are happening in their life and they're not, equating it, or they're not, everyone was in tune with it before. It wasn't just like I was in tune with it. We all kind of had that ability to feel it, and just like the tide coming in and out. So this is why it's so important to observe, like you're saying, the moon cycle, to be in communication with nature's cycle, because then you're automatically in touch with the veil. And there, you can feel your ancestors. This week it was very interesting with clients. You can smell them. You can smell ghosts. And there are certain ghosts that have certain smells. And I start to smell intentions kind of even before they happen. So that's right there, right there, present to you. And if people are in tune with their senses, then just being aware of it, pretty much you'll be able to see it. You'll start to see the unseen, and everyone is going to be seeing the unseen. That's going to happen for pretty much all people, but you have to acknowledge it. You have to witness it, and some people don't want to see it. So like Val was saying, she saw something. Well, there you go. You're, working out your own genetic line, even if it was a person not in your genetic line. It's like it's like those two, being in Scotland, when I was in Scotland, that, those two tribes even here, the Hatfields and the McCoys, kind of the two tribes against each other. You know, and it was very interesting because when we walked into this kind of castle, there was a Campbell with us. And like I could feel all the ghosts attacking her, like she was not welcome, and all this activity started happening because you know, the Campbells, I can't remember who stole their land or whatever, but anyway, so unresolved stuff, you know, and that fight's still going on. Did I answer your question?
I want to see if there's any others, because we did kind of dive right in. I want to see if there's any other questions before we go to the meditation. Okay, I think we should begin the practice then, and then we can discuss after.
Yeah, and I'm just going to set up this holding space. What is holding space? You know, if you kind of look at this jar of water, you know, it's a container. And when we go into, you know, we can hold space for a friend maybe that is having a hard time or is depressed, or especially with death and dying, that could be a group, a family, all the family that has gone even after a person has died, a person, you know, holding space. And it's a very important process. Holding space can mean this. It's a container that holds emotions. It's a circle of support, of care, of compassion. And it's, in a sense, it can be a physical energy like a hug. But the main thing, you know, in doing this process is that there is a structure around it. And there are certain things that you kind of need to be set up in that structure so that the person going through the process can feel very safe. And what happens of why we don't feel safe, why we have these unprocessed emotions, kind of, you know, the chaos that's even happening in our world, it's because typically one thing is being said and we have an experience of an emotion that's completely different. And because we have that disconnect, what it ends up happening is there's grief that we can't process. There is unresolved trauma within us. And what will happen then is, you know, we'll get triggered in a situation. And so there's, in EnergyWorks, it always starts off with awareness. Kind of as we approach what is, you know, holding space, we have to approach it with being aware. So the first thing we're going to be doing when we move this process is really being aware of the space. And it would be great too if somebody had an issue that we could kind of move it through, but we're going to go just through a very simple process. But you need to just be aware of the space that you're in. And that is about being. And it's not about fixing anyone. So if there is a person, let's say, in front of us, and when we kind of focus within, what happens is when we focus on our heart actually creates a circle around us. So, you know, we are actually, by focusing within, this circle of support kind of energetically starts to happen. And it's important that we're in agreement that we are not judging, kind of like you were saying, Val, that you had judgments of this person. People can feel judgments, people can feel opinions. And when you start to feel kind of the mind making judgments, our heart closes. So with awareness, we move into the space. There is no ego, meaning we don't just look to talk, or it's not about us. And there's complete acceptance of what the person is going to, you know, what's coming up. And we have to come at this with attention. That's the second kind of piece. What is attention? Attention is we're witnessing, we're viewing, like you turned your chair around. You're witnessing this person, kind of where they got stuck, what their emotions and feelings are. And intention, our intention has to be, this is the third thing, our intention has to be, we are there to care for, you know, the person in the space, but for ourselves too, because this process can be extremely transformative for them and for us. And And it's like the energy, kind of awareness, attention, intention, and energy, the energy we bring to this, which is compassion, which is love, and that's like a current, like our heart creates it. Our heart is the water, in a sense. It is an emotion, a feeling that we're going to be moving into the circle, because our heart creates a circle. And so we're putting this circle, I'm just setting this up around kind of the space. So the first step is that by being heart, what is heart? So just focus in your heart, and in our heart creates a circle around us the moment you focus within. And I want you to focus on being kind. So what will happen is a wave of kindness can move out in this circle. And let's just imagine right out in front of us, we have this sacred circle and a circle around us. Like around us is this fortress. It is a physical, like kingdom, a space. And we're in agreement, kind of running our hearts to the center point of the circle. And in that center, I always kind of imagine it as a diamond, and where our hearts are running kindness. And the energy that will come back to our hearts is this kindness. It's kind of the energy, the tide goes out of kindness, it comes back. And then just run care, the energy of care and support. So if we can imagine there is a person that has gone through a grief, or, it's kind of like they're in that center point where the diamond of their heart is. And we are just running the energy of this care and this love. And feel that love move out to them. And the heart wave of love just moving back. And they may be very emotional. And just move the energy now of compassion. Compassion is the empathy, like you were talking about, Val. Really being empathetic of where they're emotionally at, and just having this pure compassion and this love, this feeling of where they may be in grief and a feeling that, we can just accept it and we can just love it, accept exactly where they're at. And start to notice too, if you can be very empathetic. Empathy means that you can feel what they're going through, where they're at. You don't have to become it, but you can see that it is their experience. And because they're experiencing it, it doesn't mean that you have to absorb it, match it, but you see where they're at, and that is real for them. That is truth for them. Even if you don't believe it, that you are compassionate, that you have empathy for where they're at. And you can just say hello to that. And you can even imagine here in this process, maybe you can put a person there that you have a typical issue with. And typically what you may do is go into opposing sides and not have empathy, refuse to acknowledge it or see it, and just run that love. Run the compassion, run the emotion of care. Care is even deeper in a sense than love. I am caring energetically. My energy is moving out and caring for right where you are in this moment. And that second step, the first step is being heart. The second step is being the observer. And so just observe what's happening in the space. Like you are just looking on this person, kind of their emotion. Maybe you're observing what their body is doing. Maybe they're screaming, crying. Just observe it. And observe the energy that is in the space. It's like this bowl of water. Observe what is just happening. And by just observing it, not judging it, you have no opinion of what you're observing. You're not controlling it. You're not even giving advice or fixing it. You're just kind of being there, observing the water, observing the energy, observing the person and you being in the space, being vulnerable, or observing this person being weak. And just start to notice, if the mind has an opinion. And then just kind of drop back in your heart and provide that compassion, that care, and allow then the mind to just observe. And notice too, if even you're listening maybe with a group of people, if it's not even in a kind of sacred space, but you're listening to somebody else's problem, and notice if you have to talk about your own pain then, if you still kind of their pain and have to make it about you, and just start to dissolve that, let that go. Just be aware of, observe kind of if the ego and the mind wants to make it about you. It's kind of like holding on and fighting for, what about me in this? Just kind of return to observing and witnessing what is the energy within this circle, within this space, kind of around this. And what's important here is that when your attention is on care, is on this person, watching them, no matter what they say, what's coming up, kind of maybe these waves, you have to kind of check in with the body and start to just check in with your own body. What can happen is that if somebody's in an intense energy, you can start to match that. You can start to become that. And I want you to just check in your heart, be aware, kind of scan the body, and to not merge with that person, because if you merge with that person, now the space is not safe. And this is where it's kind of holding space is so important, because without those boundaries, and if everyone merges into it, it'll turn into chaos. So how do we keep the space safe? Start to ground. So we have to check into the body, and how do we keep our body safe? We ground. So ground your heart into the earth. See, when you ground it into the earth, it starts to release the energy, because this is energy that is vibrating in the space, and you may be absorbing it, you coming in through your pores. But the moment you connect into the earth, it starts to release. And just set your grounding cord. And you can imagine this as a grounding cord at the base of your spine, moving energy out and into the center of the planet. Like, just set it on release. That way you are keeping your body safe. That way you're in communication, that you haven't abandoned your own self. So just drop that grounding cord and allow the heart to release any energy, maybe residue that you're experiencing or feeling. It's very hard to be in a situation with intense emotions. And this is where we'll go into the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And by committing to your grounding, grounding your heart, grounding and anchoring the body, keeps you safe. That's what grounding is. I'm connected to my body. I'm not abandoning you, body. That the body is the planet. And in releasing then and letting go, the planet then observes you. Mother Earth, the goddess, Mother Earth, starts to witness you as physical form in a body. And we have her, and imagine just connecting with her. I see you, Mother Earth, and you see me, the body in this place. Because if the body is not observed or seen, this is where we get kicked out. This is where the tide will come in and sweep us away. And we all get swept away in certain situations where we get triggered. And we need someone to observe us. So we're asking the planet, observe me in this moment. And then that way it reinforces the support, the stability for the care we are providing. Because this care that we are providing for the person that we are looking at, within, without, it's the same care. And this fourth step is about being within. And being within means if the person in front of me is in pain and I start to get triggered, it means that there is a matching picture. What is a matching picture? It means that if you have pain, I have the same pain within me, and the way to support the person within the space is if I can go for that within me, the person in front of me will clear. And so when you start to feel this pain, you can identify the pain within the body. You just start to clear the matching picture. I always say match and clear. Oh, I'm always looking. Who's got my match? Where do I not own something? There's the match. When you just identify it, I see it. There is a match and clear. And you keep grounding kind of the body and sending out that love. The first step is being heart, being care, love, compassion without fixing. That second step is observing, witnessing, no opinion, no judgment, no going in and futzing with it. That third step then is being the body, meaning grounding, having your connection on a body level. Otherwise, if extreme emotion comes in, this is why most people close down their heart, because they can't handle emotion. This is why most relationships are so disconnected. But if we can ground the body, be in the body, now actually we're providing extra support and care for the person to have a witness in the body. And then the planet is witnessing us. And then the last step is looking, being within, kind of seeing, is there a Christmas, like I look at it as a Christmas tree lighting up. Is there something that lit up within me? I see it in this person. If I see it in that person, I can match it. That's a match, and it'll clear. It'll just clear, and I can let this go. So those are kind of the 4-step process. And you can do this in a grieving group. You can do this in with a friend that, or in the moment that this comes up. You can just kind of automatically, it takes 2 seconds to do. So just focus on your heart and just give that love and compassion and care within you. That you are holding space. When you focus on your heart, it means you're holding space for yourself. That's self-care, that's self-love. And if we can all do that within, then we're going to experience this world in a very different way. And so you can open your eyes.
Thank you, Kim.
Yes.
Anybody have any thoughts, reflections, or questions from that? I do, but I want to give it to others first.
The minute my cat heard Kim's voice, he just like jumps onto my lap.
Claire! And Charlie! This is Claire from Dublin. She's my other partner.
And Charlie's like, it's Kim, I'm on this.
So good to see you.
Lovely. Yeah,
Thank you for joining us.
thank you. That was really lovely. I loved it.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share one observation, and I'm wondering if anybody else had this. Going through that, I just noticed that I wasn't in my mind until you said, go to your mind. And I thought, oh, that's where everything gets messed up. And even thinking that, you know, in my past, I maybe confused empathy. I think that there have been times in my past when I thought empathy actually meant sort of getting in the soup with them, right? Getting in the mix with them. And if I actually can't feel their pain, I'm not doing a good enough job being there with them. And that's not it.
Yeah.
That's not it. It doesn't help them.
No, it doesn't help them.
But it's such a subtle and important difference. And I don't know if it's, I don't know if it has to do with like gender roles at all. I wonder if men feel that way, you know, if men feel like in order to really be there for somebody, I have to kind of get in the soup. I don't know how else to say it, kind of get into that energy with them. So Carlos, can I call you out? Cause you're the one. I'm curious, you know, as a man, if you have any thoughts or comments about that.
Well, you know, it's interesting because we all have male and female energy, right?
Right.
So those different roles could play out differently in different relationships in my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an internal conversation that I think that I have had about
Yeah.
then shutting down that empathy, right? Like, wait, I don't actually want to get into the soup with you. So I'm gonna block this.
It feels kind of like giving too much, yeah? Like pouring too much in a way.
Yeah.
Like you were kind of not respecting that boundary as she's talking about and kind of diving in a little bit too far. You know, so I think that's why it's about holding that space. But yeah, I think that I've definitely been on both sides of it, you know, as a male. So that's my experience. And I've been with partners that kind of were more one way or more the other way. And so I've kind of experienced both sides of that coin, I feel like.
And Val, it's fascinating because I know that when we start to use the gendered archetypes, especially in nature, you know, the masculine's the problem solver, the masculine's the sun, the shining light, and the moon is the nurturer. And so I know personally, I muted myself. Okay. I've come from a place of wanting to solve the problem is actually, in my own discovery, my masculine. And sometimes I've channeled my empathy through my understanding. Like I've conflated empathy with understanding, which is a mental process versus what I hear with Kim, and something I've dabbled into without being able to name is acceptance and holding space and acceptance with a place of care and kindness of another's experience without that experiencing have to align or agree with my experience. And that's kind of where, if I was to assign gender, I think that is more of a moon nurturing approach. It's less brilliant light. It's more soft, subtle allowance light. That's what opens up for me.
Yeah. I think in all of most conflicts that I see, just even with clients in everyday life, is this disconnect between what a person's feeling and what a person's thinking. And when most people go into kind of non-existence or pain because no one is willing to acknowledge what people feel. And people don't want to feel it because they feel like they will get overtaken by it. And it brings up a lot of, you know, they actually get kicked out of their space. And then it's survival. But so this is a process that we can actually do daily. And by really aligning our kind of our thoughts and the emotion and not merging. You know, a lot of times people think too, I want to connect, I want that love, and that merging with the emotion. And then what happens, especially in relationship, is people feel overtaken. Yeah, they feel overtaken. So I think someone has a question.
Hey guys.
Hi.
Hi, Beth.
Hi. Sorry I was a little late. It was more just a comment about the ability to hold space for someone requires a lot of your own work being grounded in yourself, because the tendency is, like you said, I'm either going to get pulled into their story, or I'm going to somehow assign their story and my story to each other, and then it becomes about me or us versus just them. So it actually requires a lot of your own work around how you interact, not just with that person, but with the space in between you. And I know there's a practice that comes from the lineage that Val and I study, where, you know, most meditation practices are just concentration, where there's object and subject. I'm the object and I'm focusing on a subject. And the idea is to get them to merge so that you can rest in the space in between the object and the subject. But it really does require, it's almost both at the same time. It's like getting grounded, knowing yourself, and at the same time surrendering completely to the space in between, knowing that you won't get pulled in either into their story or stuck in your own, making it about you.
That's right.
That was just my insight.
No, and that's exactly right, because I think the beauty and the opportunity that can come out of that is just like looking. That's why in the shower, I always get a bowl of water and just start looking at the space in between, because something always emerges. And, the gift of even looking at pain, looking at whatever's in front of us, if you can really just be there and observe the space in between, something comes out of it. And that's really creative force, the space in between those objects. And that's a very good point.
So I just want to be clear. Hi.
Hi.
That was great, first of all. And I'd never heard that before, that, a conflict that I might have with somebody else might be the result of like a past conflict from like our ancestors, and that we can just resolve it just by holding space and just acknowledging the person. Like, am I clear about that? Is that basically the gist of it?
We can, kind of clear our issue kind of based on our genetic line. For holding space means that we are heart-centered, because it does create a space within us. And then those 3 steps kind of providing care. We may be experiencing it on the outside, but we're really experiencing it on the inside. And then the whole space becomes that care, that being in the body, kind of that grounding, and then being kind of within. So yes, but when we look at someone, I always look for the matching picture kind of within, and it clears it automatically. It'll clear them, actually. And so if it's there is some match,
Okay.
I don't know if that made sense, if I answered that question. Maybe.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Thank you for that.
Val may have another, you may want to explain it a little different. I don't know.
No, I think I wanted to, trying to remember exactly, or figure out how to phrase this question. It's kind of building on that same theme though. Like just, if you have unresolved things in your life, regardless of whether they're tied to your ancestors or your genetic line or whatever it is, wherever that comes from, what I heard you talk about today, and that we did a little bit of practice around, is that the way to begin to resolve that is to have an awareness, acknowledge, and witness. And so I do think sometimes when we talk, Kim, I understand a lot of what you say, and a lot of it just kind of like, I energetically absorb it. I don't necessarily understand it with my mind.
That's good. That's better.
Right. And that's okay. But I also really appreciated Jen's call out of masculine and feminine in nature, because I think that I am more masculine in energy anyway. So of course I want to fix something. Like, that just made so much sense. And it's like, well, if the only way I can be present with you is to help you fix it, like, to me, I think my masculine nature is like, well, if I'm going to be in this space with you, by the time I leave this space with you after a half hour, an hour, or a day, I want you to be in a better place than when I showed up. So not what it's about. But what I liked about what you took us through today, Kim, is this idea of, regardless of where the unresolved issue is, this practice is a way to begin to acknowledge, observe, so that it can be resolved. It needs to be witnessed. It needs to be seen. You always say hello to the person, or say hello to, and it's like, and so often when something's painful, we do everything we can to not say hello, to just shy away, to get away from it.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of that. Yeah, and that's kind of where, the EnergyWorks kind of comes. It's like, it starts with awareness. It goes with attention. What are we doing with our attention? And then intention. Now I'm going to have an intention, about providing care or support. And then it goes into EnergyWorks. The movement, and it's just, it kind of changes just with those aspects. Shift happens without trying to change, without trying to create change. Just showing up kind of with like this energy, just showing up in the bowl and just being in that space changes things.
I was also going to say thank you, Jen, for the chair analogy. That was very helpful.
Yeah.
We only have a few minutes left. I want to ask the group if there are requests, anything that came up today that you'd like to build on, or that you heard in previous sessions, or however you heard about this group or this work. Maybe think about what brought you here and what we haven't talked about yet that you'd like to explore or dive into.
And some people are new here. So some people, this started because, I worked with Val and her father dying, and around kind of endings and creating new beginnings. And there are the other videos up around grief, around dying.
Right. Thanks for the background. I forgot to, if you didn't hear our very first recording, all of our recordings are on the website, and our very first recording kind of talks about our two backgrounds and how we came to this work. But now that we're in a time of a pandemic, it does seem to be a very good time to be talking about how we're dealing with endings and looking at new beginnings.
I think a good topic, I don't know if people would be interested in this, but of really taking people up to the veil, the portal, and it's kind of like going up kind of the golden stairway, going to the portal, and and working up in that space with ancestors even on the other side, and but that, I don't know if that's too esoteric for people. I see a lot of shifts and changes when I can bring people to the door. We call this the door to divinity, right? And it's the doorway, and going to that doorway, and
Sorry about that, Val. I had your name wrong. Apologize. And also, I would be interested in that work, definitely. Climbing the staircase.
or there could be other things that people want to look at in your life, or
yeah, I that's also a new vocabulary for me, and yet energetically I think Val's words are great and very much supportive in this, in the sense of that lands on my heart, but not so much, I don't know how to use that, so I would love to learn more to bring that into my life.
Great.
Well, and Claire here, you just celebrated, I don't know if you celebrated, but in Ireland, you know, Beltane just happened, and I was talking earlier about the veil, and I don't know too much about that, but
Okay, I just got a comment from Betsy too that said clearing ancestral energy. So maybe
yeah.
going up to the veil and also learning about how to clear that. So maybe next time we can focus on that.
Were you going to say something too, Claire?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, it was really, really sunny actually today, and we all woke up and like you could not have had more blue sky. Like we never get that here, but it was like polar blue, no clouds all day. It was amazing.
Wonderful. Someone's got a beautiful bird in the background. I don't know who that is.
That's me.
Of course it's you.
We got lots of birds now, right? With nature thriving, because we're all, you know, we have to be so thankful for her.
Yeah. Great. Well, we will send out the recording. We'll send out the link for next week. I think it sounds like we will probably lean towards doing the session of some skill around kind of going up to that door and then learning about how we can clear ancestral energy and diving into that a little bit more as well. Carlos, did you have something?
Hello. No, just saying thank you to everybody for holding a nice warm space, and thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
I appreciate it, and got a lot out of it. I appreciate that the ancestral energy that we're communicating about, but also just you know, seems like holding the space and listening and like pausing are all kind of in a theme that are coming to me in different ways, rather than trying to relate right away or, you know, connect in a different way, just kind of allowing things to be, you know. So that's something that I'm working with in my life. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say too, you know, this week I have EnergyWorks. You can see that on Facebook Live or Instagram. And then Moon Magic, there is a full moon on Thursday on May 7th. And then next Sunday we'll be back too.
Yeah, good call out on the full moon, Kim. All right. Blessings to everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.